Welcome back. On this day in history in 1780, during the American Revolution, Benedict Arnold committed treason and almost changed the outcome of the Revolutionary War. Arnold was set to meet with British Major John Andre to discuss handing over West Point, then a prominent fort, to the British in return for the promise of a large sum of money and a key position in the British Army. But the plot was foiled, and General Arnold was named a traitor for his acts. Arnold's actions might have changed the path of the war, but almost 1 year later, on October 19, 1781, the Americans prevailed as Cornwallis and the British surrendered at Yorktown. Now, back to the here and now. As the race for the White House continues to heat up, President Bill Clinton has been on the trail, stumping hard, understandably, for his wife, Hillary Clinton. The former president spoke with NPR on Sunday, and he talked about the Clinton Foundation, which remains a source of controversy, and just what will transpire in the days ahead. Let's take a listen.
It's hard, but if Hillary's elected, I'm looking forward to it because I think I can I think I'm better at solving problems than I was when I was president because of what I've done the last 15 years. And I think the potential of this country to start growing in a fairer and more robust way is enormous.
For more, we're very pleased to be joined by political commentator and New York Times bestselling author Joe Conason. Joe's newly released book is entitled Man of the World: The Further Endeavors of Bill Clinton. Joe, we appreciate your time this afternoon on America Talks. Thanks very much for your time.
It's my pleasure, JD.
Thank you, sir. Hey, listen, we understand that you were inspired to write this book after you traveled to Africa with President Clinton. What did you see there that made you want to write this and to look further into the work of the Clinton Foundation?
Well, thanks very much for asking, JD. I went to Africa for the first time with President Clinton in 2005 in the summer on assignment for Esquire magazine to write a profile of him and what he was doing with his post-presidency. And went to several countries there with him and saw how his foundation was beginning to make a dent in the world's decision to let millions of Africans die from AIDS without providing treatment. You know, by then, JD, we had most people in the West on treatment, even as expensive as it was. But somehow the global public health authorities had come to a decision that it was too expensive to treat people in the developing world. And Clinton and others decided that was an immoral decision. It would have led to as many as 100 million deaths and generations of development set back in Africa, and they were trying to find a way to do that. And by 2005, they had begun to actually be able to do that.
And Joe, as you mentioned that, and I'm trying to remember the timeline because as a member of Congress, I remember distinctly at the conclusion of one of the State of the Union speeches by President George W. Bush, we put billions of dollars into Africa. Taxpayer dollars to deal with this problem.
That is correct.
Now, help unpack this for me. Those dollars were not being spent properly, or former President Clinton served as a catalyst to get us to come in with a powerful thing? Help me with the chronology of the Clinton contribution in all of this.
It's very interesting, JD. What happened was President Clinton had been looking at that problem for about a year after he left the White House, and decided to get his foundation involved. And in December 2002, he wrote an op-ed article saying, we have to, as the world, we have to do something about this. A month or so later, President Bush, completely on his own, came up with what became to be known as PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Program for AIDS Relief, which was, I think, the best thing he did as president in many ways. Inspired by the evangelical community, which had itself decided that something had to be done, a mission of mercy to help people in Africa with this enormous problem. And although there was some friction at first, which I discuss in the book between the Bush and Clinton programs, eventually they ended up working together and did a great deal of good with the money from American taxpayers and the program as it was set up by Clinton and his aides, tremendous amounts of good was done, and many, many people's lives have been saved.
And as we hear this, and perhaps it is inevitable in a campaign situation, but I think it was as recently as yesterday, reports accusations that some of the drugs were, quote, watered down. Those drugs delivered to the Clinton Foundation. Do you believe that's just a political pot shot? Or what have you heard about the latest story about the treatment getting into those people in Africa?
You know, JD, this program has been audited and looked at by the development departments of world governments, including the United Kingdom. It's been audited by Bill Gates and his foundation, who has contributed a lot of money to it, and by the UN. I think it's not a coincidence that those kinds of accusations and many others, which are ill-founded, have come up during an election year. You know, up until now, you could go to the Clinton Global Initiative every year and you would see lots of Republicans there, Republican businessmen, Republican candidates. Mitt Romney spoke at the Clinton Global Initiative in 2012 and praised its work. But this year, because Hillary Clinton is running for president, and over the past year, we've seen, you know, hundreds of attacks on the Clinton Foundation's work, and I think most of them are not well-founded.
Well, we understand the time and tenor of the political season, but so often I used to hear from journalists who might not exactly agree with me politically, where there's smoke, there must be fire. Why is it different in the case of the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation, especially now as the former President Clinton is primed to give, I guess, a farewell speech in defense of the foundation later today?
Well, you know, I don't agree that where there's smoke, there's fire. You know, JD, I spent years writing about the Whitewater investigation, where there was so much smoke that the entire country was choking, and we spent $70 million investigating, and it turned out to be zero. So I don't agree that where there's smoke, there's fire. I think there's a lot of political smoke created this year, and I think in the end you'll see that the Clinton Foundation has done a tremendous amount of good work, saved millions of people's lives, and that these political attacks are just that.
Dale Bumpers, former Arkansas senator, now the late Dale Bumpers, when I was serving in Congress, he gave the final speech in defense of Bill Clinton during the impeachment trial in the Senate. Dale had a great gift.
I remember it well.
Yeah, Dale had a great gift as an orator. Mr. Clinton has much the same gift of sitting down to explain extenuating circumstances. But there is this paradox. Again, very real concern about some actions. I mean, for example, compare and contrast Bill Clinton and the Clinton Foundation with Jimmy Carter and his post-presidency, working so hard for Habitat for Humanity, among other things. Why is Mr. Clinton always at the center of controversy? Got a couple of minutes to address that.
Well, I would say, JD, he isn't always at the center of controversy. He's at the center of controversy when his wife is running for office. As I mentioned before, the Clinton Foundation and Clinton Global Initiative have been going on for 15 years now. The controversy has erupted over the past year since she decided to run for president. And I think, you know, if the election is over, you'll see the controversy subside as it has done every time in the past. Jimmy Carter, who is a very admirable person, certainly in his post-presidency, didn't run for office again. So there was no controversy to surround anything he's done. You can bet that if he were running for president, or his wife or his son, there would be plenty of scrutiny of the Carter Center and its operations. And I'm not saying any of it would be well-founded, but you would certainly see the same thing for the same political reasons from the same kinds of political adversaries.
About a minute remains. I can recall President Reagan in the post-presidency going out to speak, I believe it was in Japan, and I believe he made six figures. And there was incredible criticism of that. While there has been some concern about the speaking fees charged by Mrs. Clinton and former President Clinton, is that just a thing of the past? Or again, is it one of these things where there's a double standard? If a Republican does it, it deserves scrutiny. If a Democrat does it, well, hey, it's just the here and now of what the market bears in terms of speaking fees.
I would say it deserves scrutiny. Yeah, I would say it deserves scrutiny in every case. But the question is, was there some kind of conflict of interest involved? I think as private citizens, the late President Reagan, President Clinton, Secretary Clinton were free to do that, as have Colin Powell and Condi Rice and lots of other people whose celebrity brought them big fees. But the question is, was there something else involved, or was it just a question of what the market would bear? And I think the Clintons have come under this scrutiny. You know why? Because they've released their taxes, JD, almost every year for the past 40 years. That's the only reason we know about all these speeches since they've both been out of office.
Very good.
So
Joe,
I think they
I'm
deserve
sorry.
some credit for that,
We're
too.
out of time, but I want to put up your book again. The new book is called Man of the World, The Further Endeavors of Bill Clinton. Our thanks to Joe Conason checking in from Newsmax, New York. There's lots more ahead, including your phone calls. Stay tuned.